Quick question. Should men be more vulnerable? Check this out.
Why are weak men such a problem?
Well, weak people are a problem in general. And I don't mean physically weak. I mean cowardly, let's say, and deceitful, because I'm thinking it more in terms of moral weakness. Well, there's a variety of reasons. First of all, if you can't support your own weight, let's say, then someone else has to do it. And that's not good. And then if you don't make your pathway, if you don't pick a forthright and useful and noble pathway through life, then you'll become bitter.
Showing weakness can be a strength too.
Not weakness, vulnerability. That's a whole different thing. To admit to the fact that you're vulnerable, that's a form of courage. That's not a form of weakness. But that leads you to take whatever steps are necessary to deal with that properly. It isn't some facade that you're invulnerable. No one is invulnerable by any stretch of the imagination.
Should you be vulnerable? The answer is yes and no. When it comes to God, your mission, you should be extremely vulnerable. And in fact, I think the biggest reason why so many men suffer is because they are too rigid in this, right? Number one, they act as if there is no such thing as higher power, mission, God, which is fine if you believe that, but if you don't believe that there is a higher power, then you don't believe in mission, because you don't create your mission. And maybe this is just my opinion, but mission is given to you, right? It is revealed to you, right?
Well, also think about this. If you don't believe in God, then who's the ultimate lawgiver? Because we're all just humans, right? So why should another human being tell you what to do, what is right and what is wrong? Because you're right, maybe someone else is wrong. Their wrong might be your right. Even a government, why should you listen to a government of all the laws? Because they're just humans, right? Check this out.
Whatever God means to you, the universe, consciousness, your subconscious, doesn't matter. You need to be extremely vulnerable because you need to own up to your mistakes. You need to know where you f***ed up. You need help. You are just a man. You cannot do by yourself. So in that realm, absolutely be vulnerable.
I think a lot of people just use swearing as a crutch word because they don't believe that they can speak good enough and people will listen to them if they don't use swear words. They need to try and elevate themselves and sound cooler. I think it's weak. I also think it's vulgar and it is a sin. Apart from that, I believe it absolutely is important when we look at God. Because you see, who God is to you, what you believe in, determines your life. Look at Islamist extremists who kill Christians and even their wives because of their beliefs.
So in this context, I'm going to say no. You do not want to be vulnerable to your girlfriend, but you want to be open. This is very important. There's a difference, right? Be open, be able to vent, express some of the worries, right? Of maybe I'm going through this right now, I'll be completely honest, but I'm going to get it done because I trust God and we're going to move forwards.
Now, I believe that a lot of people just argue, misunderstand each other because they think of words differently and their meaning is different for different people. And they just talk right past each other. Before I tell you what I think about this, let's look at a few more opinions.
One thing that I feel like men have not been given the permission to do and to be is a very important word, which is called vulnerable. When I work with a lot of men, I coach single men or I coach men who are struggling in their relationships, and I start talking to them about vulnerability. Well, have you said that to her? And typically guys' responses back to me will go, she doesn't want to hear that, or she's gonna think I'm a weak man if I tell her that. Like, I can't tell her that. And really, that's just not true. You see, the fact that you can show up and be vulnerable with your woman or with a woman that you're getting to know actually shows a tremendous amount of strength.
We all have some work to do. Because you can say all you want. There's so many women I know who be like, I want a man to be as vulnerable as he can be. Cool story. A lot of y'all say that, and then when it happens, you find yourselves grossed out, and you don't acknowledge the fact that you've engaged in that behavior. Well, you've psychologically told that man that what he did was wrong. So, of course, in his future relationships, he's not going to do it. Listen, I've done that whole thing. I've done that soy boy, opened my heart up right off the top, let her know the things, and she wasn't okay with it. Part of it was my fault, but also her reaction was crazy. And look, I learned from it. Now, it doesn't mean that now I never open up. I do, but I wait until I'm ready.
You said soy boy.
Yeah.
Is that the notion that the solution to all your problems as a man is to simply be more vulnerable, it's false. It's just false. Now, is there merit in you expressing where you're struggling as a man to people in your life that deeply care about you? That part, I think, is absolutely necessary. And I've seen that in my own life with the men in my own life, where they bring their struggles and their challenges, whether it's, a health issue that they're battling with, going through cancer, trying to lose 60 pounds, and cut weight, trying to eat healthier and stop binging, trying to quit porn, struggles in their marriages, struggles in their finances. Sharing those parts of themselves when they're really struggling has a deep amount of value, because then we can contribute to each other's lives.
If you're unattractive, you can't be vulnerable. Women only like men to be vulnerable if they're attractive or rich. Vulnerability is weak, and men aren't supposed to show emotion. And I see why men think this, because women are not always receptive to vulnerability or a man showing emotion, but I think that's often when it's done the wrong way. When you guys don't know how to do it in a way that's authentic or show emotion in a way that's not, just asking for attention. I think a lot of you guys don't know exactly how to go about this, or you're doing it the wrong way. And in those cases, it's not attractive to women because it's not being used properly. Number one, you want to reveal enough about yourself to where this person can see that you have depth and character to who you are and you're not just surface level. But you don't want to just spill everything and reveal everything. You want to leave a little to be desired, right? You want to leave a little room for imagination.
Because there's no reason for me to care about you. This is another one of the lies that the world has told us, that we're supposed to care about everybody. I don't care about everybody. You don't need to care about everybody. You really don't. And when you say let them in, you know what? I think that it's better that you don't let a whole bunch of people in. It's better that you don't let a whole bunch of people in. Letting people in is what women do. That's why they have an opening in their body. They let you in. That's another effeminate trick that the world has tried to bestow upon men. We're supposed to let people in. No, you let people in that you want to let in. I'm convinced that when the time is right, you find that woman and you want to make her your wife, that you have no problem letting her in, right? You're going to melt because you did all the vetting. You decided it was right or not, and she's the one, and then you're going to be all right. Then who else do you need?
Like, these are the things that, historically speaking, did define manhood, and now they no longer define manhood, and men are left
I think
bereft.
that you can chart the moment of deterioration for the moment James Bond started crying. It's like, you take even that, take even Bond and emasculate him. It's like he has to be in touch with his feelings. Why? Why can't he just shoot people and drink martinis and seduce women? And what's wrong with that?
Right, well, that is, again, a cultural move, and you're right, against masculinity in pretty much every sphere, and the conflation of masculinity, which is good, with toxic masculinity, that all masculinity is bad, and so we need to feminize society overall. We don't need to feminize society overall any more than we need to masculinize society overall. What we need is for men to be men and women to be women. That doesn't mean that women are barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. As I've said many times, my wife is a doctor, right? What it does mean is that there are essential qualities to being a woman that are different from many of the essential qualities to being a man.
All right, so my views of what a man is supposed to be like, how he should talk, how he should think, how he should treat people, all of it is based on the Bible. Jesus is the perfect example. He was strong when he needed to be. He was humble and he was vulnerable when he needed to be. And throughout his lifetime, he was perfect. He was the perfect man, the best example that we have of a man. And first, let me just comment on this. I do not agree with people who are selfish and who do not care about other people. Jesus said in Mark 12, verse 30, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Just think about this. If everybody lived this way, we would live in a whole new, different, almost perfect world. People would stop to help you if your car broke down. They would not throw signs and swear at you in traffic if you made an accidental mistake while you lost your focus a bit because your child just died. Instead of judging a lady who looks lazy by seeing how tall the grass is growing in her yard, they would come in to ask if they could help. And in doing so, they might realize she's in a wheelchair. And they hear how her husband is in the hospital and could not mow the lawn. Even just small things like this, understanding another person, standing in their shoes first before acting, would change the world. These are small things. And when we look on a bigger scale, people will not just murder, rape, steal or bribe or play political games, using taxpayers' hard-earned money for their own sick world domination plans. Now let me just explain this, and don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. Just being selfish and caring about your own family is actually part of the problem, and it makes the world worse. Let me explain. It's because a lot of people just care about their own family, so they would do crime or bribe or just drive past people who are in need of help. And the world becomes unfriendlier, it becomes more hostile, it becomes more violent, and there's more crimes because people are just selfish. They just care about themselves. This is the reason the world is in this state. But if you are a real Christian, then you would actually care about other people and not just your own family. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you did that, the world would be different. And if you call yourself a Christian and you don't do that, then what are you doing? Because you're the same as the rest of mankind. Exactly the same as the sinful world. Are you not supposed to be the light? And Acts 20 verse 35 says, "In all things I have shown you that by working hard in this way, we must help the weak." And remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how He Himself said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." This makes me vulnerable in the sense where you can see what I'm feeling and thinking without looking weak. And in this way, you can be vulnerable, and you should be, standing up for what you believe in. Now, for those of you who say that everyone should just look at their own family, well, what about those who do not have families anymore? What about the lady whose husband died in a war, whose son died in a war, so that you can live safely in your own country? So, let me say this clearly. If you are selfish and you don't care about other people, then you are evil and you live in darkness. Now, as a man, being vulnerable about the right things at the right time is not only good, it is necessary. Just like I was now vulnerable with you guys about how I feel about people who are selfish. You should show people what you believe in and do so in boldness. That is the right kind of vulnerability. Zechariah 8 verse 16. "These are the things that you shall do. Speak the truth to one another. Render in your gates judgments that are true and make for peace." And Ephesians 4 verse 25 says, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another." I do not agree with men who lie. When you ask them how they feel about a certain issue, or when they are trying to deceive you with lies. No, you need to speak the truth in boldness. And if it's a private matter, then just say it's private. I'm not going to share with you. I'd rather not, it's private. But don't lie about it. And then my advice is, if it comes to personal issues, don't just trust anyone with it. Don't just speak to anyone you meet, "Hey, this happened," or "Hey, this happened," "Oh, this back at home," or "My wife did this," or "Oh, my son." Don't share everything. Only with people that you can trust. And, very importantly, when the time is right. Proverbs 3 verse 5. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding." You can trust God with everything in you, but you cannot always trust people. People, you need to be very careful in who you trust. But you can't trust God because He knows what's going on in your life anyway. He knows everything. So you need to be vulnerable to Him especially. But you don't need to be vulnerable to all people. Especially in an age today where a lot of people want men to be more like women. And they say, "No, be vulnerable, be more vulnerable, be more emotional, be more like this." You don't have to. Not to people that you do not trust. Now, should you be vulnerable at times and even cry and be emotional? A lot of the old generations, not so many, I didn't grow up that way, but a lot of people did. Fathers telling their sons, "Be strong, a man don't cry," these kind of things, I didn't grow up that way. My dad did teach me to be a strong man. but also that I could open up when it was the time and with the right people. You're not a robot. You were not created to be a robot. You were created to feel something. It just depends on how you do it, with who, and with what, at what time. But let me just say this first. It is wrong to be weak in the sense of having no values and morals, and vulnerable in the sense of always complaining about everything and crying about everything and just being clingy all the time, feeling like you cannot stand on your own feet. That is weakness. This is wrong. And weak men, like this, make the world a worse place. It makes society weak. Because you're sitting back, you're complaining about everything, and you want other people to fix your problems. No. A lot of men today, they need to get a backbone and take responsibility for their own actions, for their own life. 1 Corinthians 16 verse 13. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men. Be strong. Didn't say be weak, let other people do things for you and just roll over. It says be strong. It takes courage to own your mistakes, to own it as a man, to make it right, to say sorry to the people you wronged, and to move forward in life, stronger than before. That's what mistakes do. They are not there to make you weaker. They are there to make you stronger because you can learn from your mistakes. And it makes you appreciate life more. The things that you have, the things that you're working hard for, it makes you appreciate it. And you start to see other people differently as well. And you start to get more love for the world. I mean, the good things in the world, for the things that you're working for other people, for your family. Let's go back to this verse again. Read it with me. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. And now it says, let all that you do be done in love. But hear me out. There will be tough times. That's what this world is. You will encounter difficult times, struggles. And then it is okay to cry, to be emotional. Even if you're just alone in the shower or in your room, closing the door. I went through a few things. I cried when my brothers died. I cried when my dad died. I cried many times in my life. And that is not weakness. Why do you think God gave you the ability to cry in the first place? Let's take a look at the Bible. There were strong, fierce warriors who cried. Let's look at David. There were weak men who didn't want to take on Goliath because he was a giant, you know. But David went fearless. And after that, there was many battles, many. And there were many warriors with him, fierce warriors. And they cried. 1 Samuel 30 verse 3. By the time David and his men came to the town, it had been burned down, and their wives, sons, and daughters had been taken captive. Then David and his men cried loudly until they didn't have the strength to cry anymore. You need to understand that these men with David, they were fierce warriors. You know the movie 300? Those guys don't even stand a chance against these guys. For example, 2 Samuel 23 verse 8 says, these are the names of the mighty men whom David had. Josheb-Basshebeth, the Tachamonite. He was chief of the three. He wielded his spear against 800 whom he killed at one time. Go ahead and read the rest in your own time. Describes all the other amazing warriors there and what they did. Look, I am vulnerable about the right things at the right time. And it is important for me to be vulnerable, especially with the people that I trust. For example, with my wife. Also, on this channel and the other one, I'm also vulnerable about my life. Things that were very hard for me, because I'm sharing that with you guys, knowing that it can help you as well. Because there are many of you who are going through things that are a lot worse than the things that I went through. And then just sharing with you what I experienced, how I handled it, and how I came out stronger at the other side can maybe also help some of you. For example, I share with you the death of my 2 brothers. How close I was, especially with my second brother. I mean, I share that in my videos for a reason. And that's not just from, especially at the start, it wasn't always just easy talking about it, but I knew I had to do it because my life is short. And the rest of my life here on earth, I want to use it to help other people. I want to use it to help you guys. And to do that, I need to be vulnerable about the things that are extremely important. For those of you who missed some of the videos where I was vulnerable, here's a few examples for you.
I remember I walked down the aisle and I could see my sister standing there near the hospital room, and she just looked at me and ran and hugged, and I knew, man, he really is brain dead. He really is not here probably anymore. And then my family just said, hey, Daniel, we just kept the machines alive, the machines on him, so his body is still alive, but he's brain dead. So we just kept him alive for you to say goodbye. And I walked in and I asked, could I have some privacy with him? So I draw the curtains closed and I sat down there and I looked at him and his body. At that time he was working out a lot, you know, it looked really good. And I remember looking at it and touching his hand and talking to him and just saying things like, hey, if you can, just wake up, you know? I was a little bit in denial. And of course, he didn't wake up. And I talked to him a little bit. And then, sorry, this is a little bit hard. And then I started to talk to God because, you know, I knew He existed. And I started to ask Him this question: why did He take my first brother? Why did He take my second brother now? Why do we have to grow up so poor? Why did all of these things have to happen? There's a lot of things that I talked to Him that I'm not going to share in this video. But I started to ask all these questions and I started to get more angry. And we had this conversation. I can't even remember how long it was, but I just remember there was this one moment where it just stopped, and it's as if I could hear God talk to me. It's not like a physical voice, but it deep in my heart, my soul, my spirit. Daniel, you ask all these questions, but what are you doing with your life? And it's like I can see my own life from his perspective. This brother, the second brother who died, he had, he was probably the best of us. The way he lived his life and the way he talked to people. He was the good one. He was the good one, and now he's gone. And I was not the person who I became, and going out drinking so much, becoming rude, becoming arrogant, becoming a kind of...
Let me tell you my story. I prayed to God for a long time about what I have to do in this life. When I became a Christian after I lost my second brother, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know what God wanted me to do. So I started to pray, and I kept on praying, and it was quiet. I started to study psychology, and then I finished psychology, and I still did not have peace in my spirit about psychology. I kept on praying. I just knew I wanted to help people. And then one day I was traveling between China and Hong Kong. I was at the Hong Kong part, and my train, I just got out and I turned right and I walked, and the other train opposite of us just stopped, and the doors opened up and all of these people just came out, and I just stood there, and these people just coming past me, I've never seen so many people in my life. And I looked at them and I felt God speak in my spirit and asking me, Daniel, where do you think these people are going to go when they die? And in that moment, I felt God's love for them. And I looked at them. And I started to pray and I said, God, you know where they're going to go. I don't want them to go to hell. I want them to go to heaven. I want them to have eternal life. If you want me to preach the gospel to people of different cultures, then I will do it. But you need to tell me. I stood there. I couldn't move. The tears just came down my face. that night I went home. I picked up my Bible and I read, and I said, God, I'm going to continue reading. I'm going to continue growing with you spiritually as I've been doing for the last few years. But God, I want you to speak to me about what you want me to do in this world. You speak to me a little bit about something here, something there, something here, but this big thing that I've been praying for so long, you need to answer me. And I'm not going to leave you until you answer me. And I continued to read where I stopped the previous night, and I opened, and it was Romans. Romans 1 verse 1, which says, Paul, a bond servant of Christ, called as an apostle, which is a special messenger, personal chosen representative, set apart for the gospel of God, the good news of salvation. When I read this part, I felt how God spoke to me again with a rhema word deep in my spirit. It stood up, and I knew God was speaking to me, and He was calling me. To spread the gospel to all cultures and all people. And the world just changed. It was not the same. I phoned my father. He was still alive back then. I phoned him. I said, Dad, I explained to him the whole story. This is just what happened. And he was quiet on the phone. I said, hello? You still there? And after a while, he started to speak, and he said, sorry, I'm crying because God told me a few years ago, while you were still young, that He has called you to preach the gospel and to take over from me. So I cried, but I had this peace, the purpose that surpasses all understanding, knowing what I have to do with my life. You see, my dad, he said, I didn't want to tell you because I wanted God to tell you. And it was at the right time, because I wasn't ready. If He called me to be a preacher before then, I wasn't ready. You know, my dad, he was the best example of a true Christian that I ever had. And then when he got cancer, he had multiple myeloma cancer, so he had a lot of pain. We couldn't even touch him at times. And, you know, it just brought him closer to God because he walked the path with God. Day by day, I could see how his faith grew. And you know, that did something in me. It changed something in me. It showed me what I was still lacking. It was not only an example for me, but for everyone. And what I lacked was to fully surrender to God, no matter what. Matthew 16 verse 24. Then Jesus told His disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. You know, God was already starting to work this in me to fully surrender. I was afraid that God would take my dad away. After the 2 brothers I lost and all the other people, I was afraid. But then something very unexpected happened. God gave me this message. Luke 9 verse 58. And Jesus said to him, foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay His head. To another He said, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. You know, I felt this truth hit me straight in the heart because I knew I was not ready yet to share the gospel because I did not yet fully surrender to God. This was after I studied theology and before I started the YouTube channel. And man, God was speaking to me. And then as I watched my father, how he handled that pain that God allowed in his life, it shook something within me, and I decided there and then, I'm gonna follow Jesus just like my dad. Whatever happens, I'm gonna put him first above everything else, because only then can I truly share the gospel until the day that I die, until my last breath. So, should you be more vulnerable? Well, yes and no. It depends on the context. If you use it in the right way, at the right time, with the right people, then it can be good. And you should do it because it is necessary to stand up for what you believe in and to tell people what you really think, what you believe, especially if you know that it can help them as well. And let me leave you with this. How can you continue to live with yourself if you do not stand up for what you believe in? You can't. Now, if you want to hear my testimony, more about who I really am, how I grew up, and watch these videos here, and I'll see you there. In these videos, I'm going to be extremely vulnerable. Before you go, always remember, life is short, so don't waste yours. Cheers, guys.